Okay, in terms of the stuff, as always, just bad news. No, but I guess good news. This, of course, is modern philosophy. I'm Dr. Labossiere. Got a PhD from Ohio State University back in 1993. Started teaching here, that's in year 1993, which shows two things. One, I've been doing this a long time. Two, I'm really old and stuff. But hopefully I'll survive to the end of the semester. And contrary to the usual myths, if I happen to die, you don't get an automatic A, you just get a new person. Okay, what we'll do today is the usual exciting first day stuff. Firstly, the class roster is going around. If you're here, just be sure to put your initials or mark there. That way I can go on to our Rattler and then put you down as attending, so you get that financial aid, which is good, although it's money, which is evil, so it's good and evil, or evil and good, depending on what you get. Now, what we'll do is go over fairly quickly the course, bureaucratic stuff, the syllabus stuff, and then we'll go on to a bit of the background for modern philosophy. Now, what is modern philosophy? Well, in some ways the term modern is kind of misleading, because you think of modern, you think of something probably like now, cool, hip, awesome, iPhone, shiny. But unfortunately, the people who name the modern era of history, it's what's after the medieval era. So you have like really ancient, then you get like ancient, medieval, then modern. And I guess the people at that time didn't think, hey, maybe there'd be more time after our time. And so now we're in the postmodern era, which just means after that time period. And eventually we'll be in the post-postmodern era, and then it'll get ridiculous. It'll be like post-modern. But anyways, that's for future generations to sort out under people's thought. But anyways, to get back to the main point, modern basically just means the modern time period, which is essentially, depending on how you want to measure it, roughly the Renaissance up until about 1799, roughly. And people, of course, sometimes do it a little differently, but basically not now, but not too far ago. And we'll be more particular about it in just a bit. Now, in terms of the class content, here's basically what to expect. In part one, we'll have a little basic history to say more coherently about what the modern time period is, and we'll talk a bit about, so work with the assumption that people who take this may have probably never taken another philosophy course, so doing a philosophy paper will all be new. So I'll spend some time talking about how to argue philosophically. So you have the stuff you need for the paper. Now, the approach I've decided to take is basically looking at the major thinkers during this time, not all of them, but some of the big thinkers of the time. And we'll begin looking at our good dead friend, Thomas Hobbes, or Tommy Hobbes, as no one called him. Now, Thomas Hobbes is important because, a variety of reasons, not just because he's dead, but he's the guy one of the guys that helped develop some important concepts, namely, as we'll see, what's called the state of nature. And you may ask, what's that and why should I care? Good questions. Now, the idea of the state of nature is, it's a state in which there's no political authority, there's no government, there's no police. And you may wonder, why would someone come up with that? Well, Hobbes was interested in the question of, how do you justify political authority? How do you justify government? And one way to do that is imagine a scenario in which there is no government, and what would justify going from that to government. Hobbes also was interested in making philosophy, ethics, and politics into actual sciences. So we'll see how Hobbes does that stuff. Now, the second dead guy we'll look at is our good dead friend, Rene Descartes. Descartes is a really important dead guy. He's probably best known for his classic work, the Meditations on First Philosophy. Now, in terms of why it's important, in that Meditations, he creates, or rather develops, what's known as the problem of the external world. which is kind of a boring way of raising the question, how do you know that what you're experiencing is really real for real? And this led to, well, some really good movies and some really bad ones. Probably the best known is the original Matrix. There was talk of making other Matrix films, but there was only one. That's a lie I tell myself, so I can live with those movies. There were no more, just Matrix 1. And again, the challenge of the Matrix is, how do you know you're not in the Matrix, a virtual reality? And then, of course, many years later, Leonardo DiCaprio, the guy that died in Titanic, I like movies in which he dies for some reason. Not sure why. Also liked Tom Cruise dying. That's why I like the Live, Die, Repeat, because you just see Tom Cruise die a whole bunch. Nothing to do with modern philosophy. I just like to see that happen. Just saying. Just in the movies. So in Inception, of course, the problem is what? How do you know if you're dreaming or not? And they get this problem from Descartes. How do you know that what you're experiencing is really real? He also did a lot of other stuff as well, but that's kind of the main thing he's known for. How do you know what is real? So in part one, we're looking at sort of the pair of Hobbes and Descartes. In part two, we'll look at some pretty strange philosophers. We'll look at our good dead friends, Spinoza and Leibniz. Spinoza is best known for putting forth a view known as pantheism. What's that? Well, pantheism is the view that everything is God. Literally, that I'm God, you're God, Bonner is God, Donald Trump is God, Donald Trump's hair is God, Bernie Sanders is God, Hillary Clinton is God. Not in the sense that we're like, each of us is a God, but in the sense that the whole shebang is God. And that's considered pretty strange, but Spinoza tries to make that work. And he's addressing important questions in the nature of reality. If we have the view that God exists, what does it tell us about the world? Then we'll turn to our good dead friend, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. He also had a pretty strange view. He's trying to address the question of what is reality? What is the nature of the stuff? And he came up with this idea that everything is what is known as monads, which is pretty strange, and it just gets stranger. He also was interested in various other problems. For example, mathematics. And one thing, as we'll see when we talk about the background of Leibniz, he's the guy that developed the idea that you could take any number, and reduce it down to zeros and ones, binary mathematics. Why is that important? Well, if you have a smartphone, tablet, Xbox, Xbox One, Xbox 360, PlayStation, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, or PlayStation 4, and you can trace that all back to our good dead friend Leibniz. So, did a lot of important stuff. He was also concerned with a theological problem called the problem of evil, which is this problem. If God is all good, all known, and all powerful, why is there evil in the world? And he came up with a very famous answer. And his answer was, this is the best of all possible worlds, which led to a French guy, Voltaire, to write a famous novel called Candide, criticizing Leibniz. And interestingly, or boringly enough, Voltaire is probably more famous than Leibniz, even though he made his fame criticizing Leibniz. Then we'll proceed to part 3. Now, so looking at dead English guy, dead French guy, dead German guy, dead guy, then we'll go back to looking at some dead English guys. Now, one of the big figures of his time was a guy named John Locke. He's famous for a bunch of stuff. In terms of political philosophy, everyone's probably heard the expressions or the claim, right to life, liberty, and... Yeah, but in Locke's original, it was not pursuit of happiness, it was property. And one of my, centuries ago when I was an undergrad, one of our political science professors made the point of the Founding Fathers didn't want to include property because they had all the property. And they didn't want people getting ideas about taking their stuff. So they had a pursuit of happiness. And of course, if you're guaranteed the pursuit of happiness, does that mean you'll actually get anything? No, it means you can chase it all day. If you want to chase it, you may not get it. So Locke was very interested in the question of rights, such as life, liberty, and property. He was also interested in questions of metaphysics, what there is, and epistemology, how you know about stuff. Next, we'll look at another dead English guy, a guy named George Berkeley. Now, you probably have heard about Berkeley, even though you probably don't know that you've heard about Berkeley. Here's why. Everyone's probably heard the question, sometimes presented as a riddle, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, does it? Yeah, make a sound. If you ever wondered where that came from, Berkeley. And his view is that to be is to be perceived. In other words, to exist is to be perceived by something. And the question would be is if the tree falls and there's no one there, would there be any noise? And Berkeley's answer is, don't worry about it. God is watching it. God is watching everything. So the question might be, when you're in the shower and there's no one else around, is someone really watching you? And the answer is yes, God is watching you. Every time you take a shower, you're being watched by someone. But it's cool. It's nothing God hasn't seen before. So it's okay. In part 4, we'll close out the time period looking at our good dead friend, David Hume, who is Scottish, and he was known for being skeptical. And the skeptic, philosophically, is someone who doubts that we have knowledge. And his skepticism was pretty broad, covered a lot of stuff. And we'll close out with the final person this time, one of the big names, our good dead friend, Immanuel Kant. He was interested in metaphysics, the idea of like what there is, also what can we know about it, and also concerns about ethics. So basically our roadmap is Hobbes, Descartes, basically state of nature, matrix, then looking at Spinoza, Leibniz, Locke, Berkeley, Hume, and Kant. So that's the pathway of stuff. Now before turning to the gradey stuff and stuff about the blackboardy stuff, anything about the contenty stuff that needs more stuff. I do say stuff a lot, so fair one. Okay. Now one piece of good news is, aside from paying the tuition for the course, there is nothing else to buy. If you go on the Blackboard, you go to course documents, you'll find in there the following stuff. First, you'll find in there a complete set of notes from day 1 until the end. Secondly, you'll find the readings, basically the book. One advantage of having a class of people who are like not only dead, but really dead, is their works are in the public domain. That means you can just take them and put them in the book, and no one owns the rights to them anymore. So there's a choice between having you pay $120 for an anthology printed, or having you pay $0 for a PDF file of the same stuff. And being a non-awful person, I said, hey, let's go with PDF. So the reading for the class is a PDF assemblage of the writings of these people. It's the same thing you pay a lot for, it's a printed version, but the main difference is it's free, and free is good. Also in there are the PowerPoint slides. Now in terms of like the details, it basically breaks down like this. The readings, of course, it's all the stuff, super detailed. The notes are essentially outlines with some added stuff, and they are less inclusive of the readings. And then of course the PowerPoints are really, well, they're points with some power, and they're really chopped down versions. So in terms of like studying and stuff, if you just go with the PowerPoints, you'll be missing maybe 95% of the material if you just go by the PowerPoints. The notes though contain all the stuff you need for the exams, and of course, so do the readings. But if you're only going to look at one thing, I'd recommend the notes, because they give you the most for the least, without leaving out stuff. So in the course documents, you got the notes, got the readings, got the PowerPoints. Now, there's also stuff for the graded stuff. So to turn now to the grading stuff. Now your grade in this course rests primarily on 3 factors, or rather entirely on 3 factors. Exams, quizzes, and the paper. And here's how it breaks down. There are a total of 5 exams, best 4 count. For the first 4 exams, there's 1 exam for each of the 4 sections. So exam 1 covers the first section, Hobbes and Descartes. Exam 2 covers part 2, exam 3, part 3, exam 4, part 4. And each of these has a due date and a deadline. The difference is this. The due date is when we finish that section. The deadline for an exam is when it becomes de-availabilized on Blackboard. And I know de-availabilized is not a word, but Sarah Palin freed us from the tyranny of real words long ago. Thank you, Sarah. So exam number 1, be sure to complete that by February 26th. Exam 2, be sure to complete that by April 1st. And exams 3 and 4, since there's no more like extension after that, April 22nd. And exam number 5, the exciting final, be sure it's finished by April 28th at noon. So for exams 1 through 3, you get an extra month after we finish the section. For exam 4, the semester's over at that point, and similar with exam 5. Now all the exams and quizzes, all the stuff is up there on Blackboard now, so you can do the stuff anytime you want, but just be sure to complete it before the deadlines. Now for the exams, here's how they work. For the first 4, each one is 1 hour long, so once you fire it up, the clock starts. You have 1 hour from initiation to complete it. Now it's kind of like a movie playing in the theater. You can leave the movie theater anytime you want, but of course the movie keeps on going. So if you go back into the movie, it's been playing. Likewise with the exam. If you start the clock on the exam, you can walk away from it, but the clock will keep on ticking. So you have an hour to complete it, but the clock doesn't stop when you go away from it. So be sure to complete it within that hour. As mentioned, each exam covers just its section. So 1 through 4 are non-comprehensive, exam 1 covers part 1, etc. In terms of the length, each exam is 50 questions, 25 true false, 25 multiple choice. And because I care deeply, everyone gets their own personalized exam. Basically, when you start up an exam, Blackboard, or the demons that work for Blackboard, they generate an exam. They put together the questions, put together the answers, and then you take it. And then everyone gets different exams. I mean, the same, covering the same material, but different questions and different answers stuff. Now the 5th exam, the final, is somewhat different. It is 2 hours long, once you start the clock, and it's got 100 questions. So 50 true false, 50 multiple choice. The exams are 40% of the overall grade. Now as mentioned, the best 4 out of 5 exams count. And you can use this a couple ways. One way is this. Since the best 4 out of 5 count, it means if you do the 4 and you're satisfied with your grade, or if you just don't want to take the final, you could not take the final. And here's how to tell if you need to take the final, because I assume no one wants to take the final, or not. If you go on Blackboard, you'll see under the grades, the most important category for the grades is the overall grade. And this is how you're doing in the class for real, in real time. Now, this involves 2 important assumptions or factors. One is your overall grade assumes a 0 on anything you haven't done. So at this point, most likely, if you haven't done anything, your overall grade would be at 0% F. Now, when you see that, don't panic, because I haven't pre-failed people. It's just that, again, the assumption is anything you haven't done, treat it as 0. Second thing is, Blackboard is set to automatically keep the best 4 exams, best 10 quizzes, and the paper. So the overall grade reflects a 0 in everything you haven't done, and it's keeping all the best stuff. Now at this point, of course, if you haven't done any exams, it's keeping 4 zeros. If you haven't done any quizzes, it's keeping 10 zeros. And if you haven't done the paper, it's keeping a 0. So the overall would be 0. But as you do stuff, the actual scores get put in there. So the overall grade is like a progress meter. It tells you what your grade is in the course for real at that point, and what would happen if you just stopped. So if you simply stopped doing more quizzes or exams, etc., your overall grade would be your true grade in the class. Now in terms of how to tell whether you need the final or not, here's the test. Once you've completed 4 exams, the paper, and all the quizzes you intend to do, look at your overall grade. And if you find that overall grade to be satisfactory, and you find the final wouldn't improve it, by a letter grade, then unless you just like taking exams, there'd be no compelling reason to take the final, because the best 4 out of 5 count. And so if you didn't take the final, that would be a 0, but it's already factored in as a 0, so it'd just be dropped. So because Blackboard is keeping the best 4 scores, and assuming anything you haven't done is a 0, it's already factored in. So you can, when you go and check your overall grade, it would already take into account not taking the final. Now if you do decide to take the final is no risk. It can't lower your grade. In fact, doing more stuff could never lower your grade, because the overall grade again assumes a 0 in anything you haven't done, and you can't do worse than a 0. So if you take more stuff, it can never lower that grade. The grade will either stay the same, or it might improve. So those are the exams. Best 4 out of 5 count, they're 40% of the grade, and the Blackboard is already keeping your best 4 exams and dropping the worst one. But at this point, it's most likely got 4 zeros and dropping a 0. Before we go into quizzes, anything about exams that needs more exam stuff?
So since the material for the class is already under course documents, if we start reading ahead, is it possible that we could pass the exams without the class lectures?
Yes.
Okay.
Excellent question. Yeah, so what if you want to do that? What if you want to say, I'll get this done. I got a spring break next week. So here's how to do that. All the stuff is up there already, ready to go. You can go all the exams, all the quizzes, and the paper are already open, ready to be completed. Now, I've had people try to do just go ahead. And sometimes it's worked well, and sometimes it's been disaster, doom, death. No death, just doom and disaster. The class cannot be paid. Kind of scary, but here's how to tell if you should press ahead. In addition to the real exams, there are also sample questions, which are, there's 4 of them, 4 sets. 1 corresponding to each of the real exams. They're basically practice exams. The practice exams, it will tell you like what your score is on it, and it will tell you the correct answers, but the practice exams don't count for you. They don't improve your grade, but they don't count against you. So taking them on the plus side is no risk. You can't hurt your grade by taking the practice ones. On the minus side, you can't improve your grade because they don't count for you or against you. So the thing to do before taking a shot at the exams, the thing to do is, if you want, try the sample questions for that section, because there's a couple good reasons to do so. One is, they're the same sort of questions in the real exams, so you get to see the sort of questions are right. So you know, okay, that's how the questions will look. Also, since they're pulled from the same question banks, there may be some overlap. You may luck out and get questions on your sample that shows up on the real, or you may not. Also, and most importantly for taking stuff ahead of time, is since they're basically the same as the real exams, if you do well on the sample, the real exam should go equally well. If the sample goes disastrously, the real one will probably go disastrously as well. So the thing I'd recommend is before committing to the real exam, try the sample one. And then if that goes well, then go for it. Yeah, so the grade depends basically on completing the stuff. And if you do complete it early, that's fine. Like I said, everything's available now, but before deciding to rush ahead and do stuff, Probably going to need a test if you know the stuff with the sample things and not get too far ahead. And if things start going badly, it's probably good to stop searching ahead. Got the people who like, they said, well, it was going really badly, so I kept trying more stuff. It's like, no, if things are going badly, you don't keep doing that. It's like I stabbed myself and it hurt. So I kept stabbing myself because I thought I would feel better. It's like, no, it just keeps getting worse. Don't do that. The quizzes. Here's how the quizzes work. Back in the before time, back before the age of Blackboard, I would read them out, verbally, and people would write down the answers. But now, thanks to the magic of Blackboard and its infernal demons, you can take the quizzes online. Here's how they work. For each of the sections, well, there's a quizzes folder. If you go in the quizzes folder, there's 4 folders in there. Quizzes part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. And each of the folders corresponds to one of the 4 sections. And the deadlines for these are as follows. For part 1, be sure the quizzes for part 1 are done by January 29th. For part 2, February 26th. Part 3, April 1st. And part 4, April 22nd. You can do these ahead of time, but just be sure they're completed by then. And these deadlines are all, except for the final, they're all end of day. So 11:59 p.m. Now, if you were taking like a quiz or an exam or something, and something goes wrong, then email me with your name, the class, particular problem. Now, I'm like old and stuff, so I go to sleep early. To be honest, 9 o'clock. But I get up at 5 a.m., so I still sleep 8 hours. I just, do weird stuff. It'll happen to you too. When it happens, as you get older, your clock gets weird. Another thing that happens is you enjoy life less, for real. Because when everyone probably heard like, oh, teenagers do all kinds of crazy stuff. They're not actually crazy. The way the brain works is when you're young, your like enjoyment level is set to like 12 on a scale of 10. So everything feels, everything seems really awesome. That's why teenagers do all kinds of crazy stuff, because it's all awesome. But as you get older, it starts ticking down. It's like a friend of mine said, he says, I enjoy video games less. And I said, and he said, but they're so cool now. And I said, oh, it's you, because you're getting old, and you're getting close to death, and life just isn't not as enjoyable. And so, the main point is, this is the most enjoyable point of your life. Enjoy it, just gets worse from here. Sorry. But again, the point was that I don't stay up very late. And so if you like wait until like 11 or 11:30 to do the exam and it locks up, you'll be kind of out of luck. So it's a good idea to do them maybe like at least like a day before the deadline in case something goes wrong. Because if something goes wrong while I'm asleep, it'll be sad. But anyway, getting back to the quizzes. There's about 19 or 20 or so quizzes. Best 10 count, they're 30%. The quizzes work like this. Like the exams, they're on a timer. They're on a 5-minute clock. So once you fire it up, you have 5 minutes. Kind of like the $5 for long. Whatever happened to that Jared guy? That's right, I mentioned it. Police check on him. Maybe he's broken up. Everybody watch out. So, each one is 5 minutes. And so once you fire it up, you have 5 minutes to do the questions. And unfortunately, they're pretty short. It's 5 true-false questions. And they're always about, say what it's about. And they correspond, they're originally, like I said, given in class, so each quiz corresponds to a week, like quiz 1, week 1, quiz 2, week 2, quiz 3, week 3, etc. Although this year we started on a Thursday, so quiz 1 will cover like today and probably like Tuesday. It's kind of weird starting this late, but that's life. But it is nice having the weekend coming up so fast. That's a good thing. Although they could have extended like spring, winter break, maybe a couple more days. Anyways, just putting it out there as a suggestion. Maybe next year. So the quiz is 30%, and again, 5 questions, true, false. Now of these, the best 10 count. So once you get 10 perfect quizzes, you're quiz capped. You're done. You're at 100%. If you keep taking more, you'll still be at 100%. Now if you have less than 10 perfect quizzes, and there's still more to take, it's generally worth to keep taking it. Because if you do worse on a quiz than your previous 10, it just gets dropped. If you do better, it replaces the previous ones. So taking, doing more quizzes, no risk. Either if you do worse, your grade stays the same. If you do better, your grade improves. The third thing,
Question.
oh yes,
How many questions on the quiz is it?
oh, they're just 5.
5.
Yep, pretty short. Okay, no questions about Subway or Jericho. The paper. There's one paper, and it counts, basically. It's 30%, and the drafts are done, you print them, bring them to me so I can mark them up, but they're submitted on Blackboard. So you can turn the paper in from anywhere, there's an internet connection at any time. Now the paper has some, and we'll go over in great painful detail about how to do the paper, but it has some different deadlines. One is the draft. If you want to do a draft, and there's no penalty for not doing one, the deadline is March 31st. So if you want to do a draft, you can do as many drafts as you want until either you get sick of the process, you just go, oh God, no more writing, or you achieve the results you want, because I'll put a tentative grade on each one, or time runs out. And time runs out March 31st. Now, for turning the paper, there are, well, 4 options, because not turning it in is always an option. The best deadline is the +5 deadline. This is the real deadline. If you have the paper in on Blackboard by end of day, April 5th, you get your base score +5. So basically half a letter grade just for being on time. Now, what if you need more time, or things go wrong? You know, because back in the before time, when people had to print out papers and turn them in by hand, you know, you actually had to come to campus, bring the paper, etc., and things could go wrong. You know, computer could break down, cars could break down, you know, there could be zombie attacks, all kinds of stuff. But, so I just basically put on an extra week. So, if you don't have the paper done by April 5th, you get a free week to do it in, essentially to April 12th. If you turn it in then, you miss out on the +5, because that's for being on time, but you get full credit. So, reward for being on time, and just nothing for, well, full credit for being a week late. Now there's also one for desperation. So sometimes what happens is people kind of rolls around and like, oh geez, that's right, I had like a paper, I was in like a class, I should probably do something. April 22nd, at end of day, there's the 50% deadline. And yes, people have actually managed to pass the class with that 50% deadline. It's designed for people who are like, oh yeah, I'm graduating, I should probably do something, type of scenario. So best, good, better than nothing. Now in terms of the paper as note, we'll go over in great detail about how to do it, but if you want to get a head start, here's where to look. If you go on Blackboard, go into the section where there's the paper, there's the following stuff in there. First, there's a paper guide, which is, I think it's about 22 pages long. And it goes through step by step how to do the paper, how to write the paper, how the paper will be graded, and it includes, one reason why it's so long, it includes a full sample paper, showing you like exactly what a paper would look like. There's also in there the PowerPoints for the paper, and there's also, in case you missed the class when we talked about the paper, there's also 3 videos for the paper. A paper on how to do the draft, a paper on how to turn the paper, a video on how to do the paper, turn the paper in, and a video on what the paper is about. So it's basically 3 main ways to see how to do the paper. One is the PDF, one is we'll cover it in class, and thirdly is a YouTube video going over how to do the paper. And yes, people still ask me, what is the paper about, despite all those 3. I'm thinking about setting up one that beams it directly in people's brains, but we've had some accidents with that. It's been, well, unfortunate. So, I'm not saying Donald Trump was my first test subject, I'm just saying there have been unfortunate hair-related results. Okay, so that's the grade stuff. Now there's also, also a videos thing there. As a service to people who don't go to class, which probably just encourages people not to come to class, I recorded some lectures last year, and I get a little camera up there, I just record the stuff and I don't edit it because, I like, my aesthetic view is that you just print up raw reality, which is a fancy term for I'm too lazy to edit that stuff. And I'll just put it up on the YouTube, so in case you miss a class, or want to review it, or want to like convert it into some sort of bizarre mocking video, because it's totally legal, it will be there. And I'll have them in the videos folder. Okay, before passing on to the last of the bureaucratic stuff, any stuff about the stuff that needs more stuff?
Really quick on the video. How soon after the lecture do you post the video?
Typically what I'll do is I go, actually right afterwards, I go to the office, pull the card out, put it in the computer, uploads it, so it takes pretty fast connections, so probably about like an hour for it to get.
So typically the same day?
Yes,
okay.
yep.
For the draft of the paper, I know you said there'll be tentative grade on it. Will you make notes on the paper so we know kind of where we should put?
Yes, yeah, because in fact, the earlier the paper gets in, the more stuff that's on there. And so, yeah, if you turn it in, I'll put very detailed comments on it. And you can also, if you're not sure, like, what they mean, or you can come in and ask about it, like, what should I do here? And yeah, there'll be not just a grade, there'll also be comments on it.
Okay.
And if, in the amount of stuff I put on them depends on, like, how early I get it. Like, if someone comes in, like, 2 minutes before the end of my office hours on March 31st, then I'll be like, stop, clearer, numbers. So, but good question.
Sorry, I have another question about quizzes. I know you said that there are 4 parts, but when you click on like quiz 1, I know there are 4 different short ones. So all of those 4 short ones should be completed by the 29th?
Yes, yeah, also a good question. There's, yeah, so for the quizzes, there's 4 folders there, as you said, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and those correspond to like, there are 4 quizzes under part 1, and so be sure to complete those quizzes by the end of that section. Same for part 2. For part 2, be sure to complete all the quizzes in the part 2 section by February 26th. You can do it ahead of time, but just be sure to have them done by then.
So if we finish the assignments ahead of time, we don't have to come to class?
You're paying for it, your call. It's like a movie. You buy the tickets, you can show up if you want to or not. It's like life too.
What time in the draft, are we going to have a blackboard or are we turning a paper draft to you?
Oh, the drafts go to me so I can mark them up. And then, but the final version just go on Blackboard. That way you can turn them in from anywhere at any time as long as they're in by the deadline. Also, they have to run through Safe Assign, just to let people know. Sometimes people are surprised by that. As a warning advance, it does go through Safe Assign. And if you do see like a big score that says like, you know, people sometimes ask like, what if you see like a big, you know, Safe Assign score, like seeming plagiarism? I don't go by the number, because a person can turn in a paper that's perfectly good, that has a high, you know, result. Because if you're, you know, citing stuff properly, Safe Assign doesn't distinguish between citing stuff properly and just copying. But just to warn people ahead of time, it does go through Safe Assign. Some people are kind of surprised by that, and it's kind of sad. Okay, anything else about that stuff? Okay. The syllabus has a bunch more stuff on there, and rather than just read it at you, you can gaze upon the magnificence that is the syllabus. But a few, I guess, final points to include. One is the QEP thing. QEP, it's about critical thinking. This class, of course, will enhance quality because we'll learn about logic and reasoning and so forth. So if an administrator asks you, did he speak about QEP? You can honestly say, yes. Yes, he did. Or if you want to get me in trouble, you can say, he didn't mention a damn thing about it. Second thing, academic learning compacts. The compacts it's on the syllabus, has the links to them, and this class focuses on, you know, critical thinking and brain communication and philosophy stuff. And so it specifies there about the ALC. So once again, if the administrator says they speak of the ALC, you can say yes or no, depending on how you feel at that moment. Other thing is, last thing is the special circumstances. And this, of course, is everything that is special. So if there are special circumstances that impact your, you know, class stuff, The thing to do is let me know as soon as possible, because the earlier I know, the more that I can do. So if someone sends an email, say June 3rd, saying, I had some problems, I'd say, nothing I can do at that point. So as soon as something occurs, if something occurs, or if there's a special situation, just let me know as soon as possible. And I'm always willing to work to accommodate people make all reasonable accommodations for special circumstances. But of course I need to know, and depending on the circumstances, I would need like a certain amount of time to make stuff happen. So long and short is, let me know as soon as you can, and don't wait until it's too late. Okay, so that's bureaucratic stuff. And there's a lot more stuff in the syllabus, but you can gaze upon that at your convenience. Before I get into a little content in our remaining time, anything about the stuff so far that needs more stuff? No, the wrong fonts. Okay, what we'll do to wrap up today is look a little bit at the historical background. And this is mainly not because it's a history course, but to provide some context for the dead folks, the dead philosophers we're looking at. Now our starting point, and I actually didn't make the slides correctly, but apparently someone removed the font from the computer, so I know I actually had to send it. So it begins with the Renaissance, which began in the 14th century, Italy, and rapidly spread like a virus throughout Europe. Now, the humanism of this time is not this, well, you often might have heard the expression, secular humanism, which is basically, non-religious humanism. The humanism of this time, a little bit different. It involved celebrating the richness of the human spirit. It involved, enjoying the fruits of culture. And the idea in terms of why it was humanism as opposed to secular humanism was that it reveled in the goodness of the creation that was made by God. So this is humanism, but non-atheistic humanism. Now there are some important factors involved in the switchover. First, interestingly and importantly enough, this sort of step forward past the Middle Ages was a step back to the ancient time. There was a rebirth of interest in Greek and Roman literature, philosophy, art, etc. And so there's sort of an ironic, back to the past to get to the future type of deal. Also very important was a new technology, which revolutionized the world. And this time, of course, it was the printing press, which, today we think of it as old, because it is old from our standpoint. But to sort of see the impact it had, you can think of it in terms of, well, I was going to use the internet, but the internet's been around a really long time too. It's like Snapchat. Except it doesn't involve, well, I guess they did porn with that too. So everything is, porn is used for everything. Or everything is used for porn. Yeah, so the printing press had a huge impact. The main one was this. Back before the printing press, if you wanted a book, how was the book created? Yeah, by hand. You just somebody write it out. And there were some pretty impressive manuscripts. Not only would they write stuff out, you might have seen illuminated manuscripts, which are beautiful works of art. And as you might imagine, even if you're just writing it by, not being fancy, writing an entire book by hand would take a great deal of time. And so only people who were fairly wealthy could afford books. And also, back in those days, literacy was pretty low. And so even if someone could afford a book, they might not be able to read it. What the printing press did was allow people to mass produce books. So, it was still pretty slow. The way the presses worked, you'd have to cut the book basically, typically on a wooden block and carve it out. And you typically do like a page at a time, so you put the thing in, inkjet. I actually used one of those things. No, not when I was, I mean, I'm not that old, but I'm saying like a recreation type of deal. But they're faster than writing by hand, because you can do a single page, instead of writing it up by hand, you just print it. And so it allowed books to be somewhat mass produced. And so that had a huge change. Also, in addition to books, people could print pamphlets, brochures, and so forth, and distribute information. This was an early form of the information age, the ability to transmit information. And the internet essentially is just an extension of this. Instead of distributing it on paper, it's distributed through devices. So, what else was going on then? Well, one that changed, going back to languages, back in the Middle Ages, the language used by people who are educated was Latin, which still survives today. And you go to med school or law school, you learn a lot of Latin stuff. Because Latin, everything sounds cooler in Latin. Like glutamus maximus sounds way cooler than what it means. But one change that occurred during this time was a switch from Latin to the common tongues. Scholars started working in English and French. And if you combine, works written in languages people, could read with the printing press, it meant a spread of ideas. There were many more books, and people could read them. Also, what happened was, as we'll see when we talk about the philosophical stuff, there was a move away from sort of the old philosophy to the new stuff. And again, going back to the kind of, what is old is new again, there was a return to the Greek ideals of individualism. We think of like democracy, for example, as a new idea, but of course, if we look back at ancient history, it existed in ancient Athens. Not, what we consider today like full democracy, but at least there was a form of democracy. Now, religion also underwent significant change. Back in the day, the Middle Ages, there was, a schism in the church and it was divided, but for the most part, Europe was sort of like unified Catholic. But along came, of course, Martin Luther, 1483 to 1546. And what's he known for? What did he do?
He put them on the church, right?
Yeah, the 95 Thesis in the Church of Wittenberg. And make a long story short, he began the Protestant Reformation, which divided the once unified Catholic Church into the Catholic Church and then Protestant churches, and which continues to this day. And so we see the religious unity of Europe completely broken, which leads to all sorts of exciting wars and other stuff. Next, there's also significant social and political changes. I've already mentioned the changes in religion had significant impact. There's also a change in money and commerce. How so? Well, what we saw was this. First, back in the Middle Ages, typically how would you, suppose you wanted to get like some chickens. How would you pay for like some chickens?
You would trade something else for them.
Yeah, you might trade like a goat. I'm not sure what the going rate of like goat to chicken was. Maybe like 1 goat, 10 chickens or something. Yeah, so you had a barter economy. And what are some of the disadvantages of barter economies? We have to trade like chickens for goats.
No set prices.
Yeah, there's really no set prices. You don't really know like how much your goat is going to be worth. And one problem with goats is they do what? Well, what's the difference between a goat and a dollar bill? Yeah, your goat can die. So if your dead goat is worth not a lot. Yeah, so we see this transition from a broader economy. No set prices. You have to carry around like goats or chickens or stuff. You carry like, I don't know how you make change for a chicken. Maybe like some eggs or something. And so obviously it was pretty cumbersome. And then once you get a cash-based economy, it allows the development of all kinds of stuff. Basically, our modern economy, which eventually leads, of course, to Wall Street insider trading and the economic collapse. So not all great, but I guess better than goats. Also, speaking of banking collapse, the use of money gave rise to banking, because if you have like a bunch of goats, you really can't put your goats in the goat bank to get goat interest. They die. Once you create banking, you get capitalism. And what this resulted in, interestingly, boringly enough, was governments became more stable. The economic system became more stabilized. And we saw the rise of the middle class, which of course, default politics, is now declining. Now once you get a middle class going, and you've got a banking system and wealth and so forth, people became less interested in heaven, in religion, and more interested in life on earth. So you see a sort of a switch in focus from a medieval heaven and so forth to looking more focused on life on earth. So people's perspective changed, which had a huge impact, not only in philosophy, but also politics, and even the arts. Now, our concern, of course, is with the intellectual parts of it. So what impact did this have? Well, another important thing to consider is the rise of what's known as modern science. Now, science has been around for quite some time. In fact, it goes back to this guy named Thales, who predicted an eclipse, considered the founder of science and philosophy, and of course died and is still dead today. So what is modern science? Well, here's what happened. First, the Renaissance, interestingly and somewhat ironically, began to return to ancient thought. One thing that people don't always bring up is that astrology, witchcraft, alchemy, and such abounded. And, for example, Newton, considered one of the great scientists, he was very interested in alchemy and other stuff as well. Now, what the modern science was doing in many ways was responding to the old science. So what was the old science? Well, the two main old science guys were these guys. First, there was our good dead friend Aristotle and a fellow named Ptolemy of Alexandria around the 2nd century AD. And this was their view. And this is this is oversimplified, but it nicely exemplifies the transition from ancient to medieval to modern. And here's how it goes. This is Earth, where we live and keep our stuff. We are here. Oh, not exactly. Now, if you know anything about the history of science stuff, sort of the traditional view was that, that the Earth is the center of the universe, or at least the solar system. And that, of course, is called geocentric. Geo, of course, for the car, the geo, for Earth, so literally Earth-centric. And the idea is that all the other planets, like Mars, and Venus, and the Sun, all rotated around the Earth. Now, that, of course, was not a stupid idea. Why? Well, does it feel like the Earth is moving? No, it feels like the Earth is standing perfectly still. I mean, even we are actually moving very fast. In fact, when people get vertigo, one explanation I've heard, which is probably wrong, is people realize how fast the Earth is moving. We're actually whipping around pretty quickly. But it's a matter of relativity. Relative to the Earth, we're moving the same speed, so it's like we're not moving at all. So we feel like we're standing still. And when we look up at the sky, what do we see? It looks like the sun is, moving around us. It looks like we're still. And so it wasn't a stupid idea, because as far as we can tell, it feels like we're standing still, and it looks like stuff is moving around us. It matched the observational evidence, mostly. Now, so the old view, going back to Ptolemy of Alexandria, was that this is the center. We are the center of everything. And everything rotates around us. Now, one reason for this, again, is it seemed to match the observations. It seems like we're standing still and things are moving around us. Also, it had a theological background. If you go to Psalms 93:1, states the earth will not be moved. And so it had a religious grounding and observational grounding. So it made perfect sense. Now, one slight problem with it. Now, to map out the other planets rotating around the Earth, what they had to do is they had to work in what were called epicycles. In other words, to explain how things like, say, Mars or Venus would move, they had to like say, well, it would kind of do a loop-to-loop to make sense of the observation. Now, even that wasn't, devastating, because looking at it, you might say, well, that's just the way things are. That's just what they do. That's how the planets move. It goes around, and then does a little loopy thing, and comes around, and, it held for a long time. Until, of course, along came a fellow named Copernicus. Nicholas Copernicus, born in 1473, died in 1543, still dead today. He's the guy that's famous for his work called The Revolutions of Heavenly Bodies. And he put forth a heliocentric view. Now, heliocentric changes things up a bit. What you do is he switched it from the Earth being the center to the sun. And so everything rotates around. So we're the third planet, so you gotta put in Mercury and Venus. And that's where Matt Damon was during his film. Mars. Now, by doing this, it takes care of most of the epicycles. So it ended up being a simpler view. Now, one reason why Copernicus accepted this was philosophical. We won't talk about the Neoplatonists because they're like really old and really dead. If you take the ancient and medieval class, you know about these guys, literally knew Platonists. And for the Neoplatonists, the circle is the perfect figure. And so their motivation was actually kind of, a weird one. The idea being that those little epicycle things, that's just wrong, because they're not proper circles. And this is a proper circle. Now, it turns out that Copernicus was right. Now, in order to prove this, we had to wait for our next dead guy. Well, he wasn't dead at the time. Galileo Galilei, 1564, 1642. And of course, still dead today. So what was Galileo known for? What did he do? And besides the wine stuff? Yeah, telescope guy. He had developed a telescope capable of 100 times magnification. And what he did was he observed the moons of Jupiter and saw them rotating around Jupiter. And so he believed that Copernicus got it right, that we're rotating around the sun. Now, this had some important impacts. Impact one was, of course, we're no longer the center of the solar system. We're just the planet revolving around the center. Secondly, it goes against a view put forth by our good dead friend Aristotle. He had the view that the heavens were unchanging and perfect, and earth was changing and imperfect, which of course is also connected to the religious view that, heaven literally and earth. But once you have Galileo's view, you end up with a change. You don't end up with the earth being this distinct from the heaven. It's all like the same stuff. So revolutionary in many ways. So how was Galileo thanked for this amazing discovery?
Wasn't he put in jail?
He was. Yeah, his book was condemned. He was put under arrest until he died. And I think last year, the Vatican admitted they were wrong about Galileo. So better late than never. But interestingly, the Vatican is one of the best observatories in the world now. So just took a little while. So since this is a philosophy class, not a science class, a good question is, so what did this sciencey stuff have to do with the changes in philosophy? Well, here's the answer. One that Galileo did was this. And again, one of the interesting or unusual things about the modern era was they took a lot of ancient stuff and used it. And so Galileo is no exception. Now, long ago, back before Socrates, there was a Greek philosopher named Democritus, and he put forth the idea of atoms. Now, these were not, protons, neutrons, electrons, quarks, charms, etc. But he put forth the view that there were small, tiny particles of matter, and he believed that they had differing shapes, which I guess is totally correct. And so some would have little hooks, and they'd hook together. And those particular details were wrong, but his basic idea that stuff is made up of tiny, tiny particles turned out to be correct. Now, what Galileo did was this. He took Democritus's idea, and the philosophical term for it is this. And I guess I'll put it in a broader context. One classic philosophical question is, what is the nature of reality? What is stuff made of? And there are basically three main answers in terms of what there is. And they typically involve, not surprisingly, how people fit into this. Now, one answer is what's called materialism. Not in the sense of, liking, fast cars and expensive houses, but in the sense that all that exists is purely physical. It's matter. Now, if you're a materialist, you believe that everything is just matter. So when it comes to people, a person is just his or her body. It's just physical stuff. Now, Democritus was a materialist. He believes it's all atoms. Now, the opposing viewpoints, one of them is what's called dualism, with an A, not with an E, because dual with an E is like pistols at dawn, and dual with an A is two of stuff. But two of what stuff? Well, if you're a dualist, like our good dead friend Descartes, then you believe there's two basic types of stuff. One is the body, your physical stuff, the shell, the machine, however you want to phrase it. But there's also the ghost, the spirit, the mind. And dualism is a view most religions hold to dualism. You have a physical body, it dies, and your soul goes somewhere else. Somewhere good, like heaven, or somewhere bad, like New Jersey. Apologies, you might be New Jersey. I just say because I have a lot of friends from New Jersey, so it's a bad place. Just saying. Not the worst place, kind of bad. So the third option, we were like, oh, what's the third one? Well, the third one is this. It's called idealism, sometimes called immaterialism, and that's the view that it's all just mental. And our good dead friend George Berkeley and our good dead friend Leibniz subscribe to this view. It's all just ideas. So those are our three main options. When you look at it from the standpoint of a person, you and me and everyone else, we're either a body, just a body, physicalism, or we're shell, machine, and a ghost, dualism, or we're all just ghosts. It's all idealism. Now, Democritus put forth the idea of materialism. The world is matter. So what Galileo does is he takes the idea of atoms, of material, and he adds the following thing to it. Our good dead friend Plato which if you take the ancient course, or you'll see a bit about him, he believed that the world was essentially matter governed by mathematics. And our good dead friend Pythagoras, he's the triangle guy. Everyone's probably heard the Pythagorean theorem. He actually had followers. Like it was actually a cult, for real. They believed they were like a math cult, which sounds kind of weird, but for real. They also believed in reincarnation, and so they're vegetarians because they believe that people are reincarnated as animals, so you shouldn't eat animals. So they had all kinds of weird stuff going on: triangles, math, reincarnation. Now they believed that everything literally was math. The whole world is made of mathematics. Which, if you talk to some mathematicians and physicists today, they believe the same thing, and some of them are even vegetarians. Now, if you combine these things, you get matter governed by mathematics, which means you get physics, which is basically matter and motion governed by math. And so we see the rise here of what we consider now modern physics, which are, if you ever wondered, like, why do they call that physics? And the answer is physical. It's about physical stuff. Why is there so much math? Well, Plato and Pythagoras. So one major contribution of Galileo was that, developing this notion of reality as matter governed by math. Why is that important? Well, the answer is physics. So we can trace, modern engineering, the rockets that put our satellites up in the sky that allow us to, use GPS, developing all the stuff in physics that allows us to do the internet, design cars, and so this all made it possible. So it's, as they say, huge. Once you get physics, you get all that engineering stuff. And then eventually you get like iPads. So pretty good. Now, he also added the following other stuff. So in addition to the stuff with dualism, materialism and idealism, we also have some other concepts. Before we go to those though, anything about this stuff that needs more?
Just a quick question. When you were talking about dualism and idealism, will that stuff be in the notes part of the blackboard or the text?
It's in there somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, because some of the stuff, everything on the test comes from the notes. But I do put in extra stuff to make it worth coming to class.
No, yeah, that's because I was
Yeah,
a
but
little lost and I still follow.
Okay, good. Yeah, if you do get lost, just let me know. Yeah, it's always fair to say, where the hell are you going? It was a fair question.
Okay, so you said materialism, dualism, and idealism. Those are three things, and what is the category?
Oh, the category is basically the view of it's metaphysics. Yeah, put it in category. And metaphysics is the study of what is real. And so the question, when you ask the question, what is real, how is the world made up of, those have been the traditional three answers. So one answer is it's all just matter. We're just, crudely put, we're just beat. The other possibility is dualism, we're bodies plus minds. And most religions fall under dualism, because you've got body, soul, God, angels, devil, whatever, other stuff perhaps. And then idealism is it's all mental. And the dead guys we'll look at are, for materialism, we'll look at Tommy Hobbes, materialist, and then for our idealist, will be our good dead friends Berkeley, Leibniz, Hume. For our dualists, will be our good dead friends Descartes, and Locke, and possibly Kant, but no one's really sure about that. And these are concepts that will occur throughout the course. And when we cover the particular dead guys, I'll say that this guy's a dualist, or this guy's an idealist, or this guy's a materialist. Now this, of course, has implications for today. For example, if materialism is true, when you die, what happens? Yeah, that's it. Game over, man, as they say. Unless, of course, because, you know, one question is, if you're a materialist, what does that mean in terms of, like, you know, afterlife? And one answer is, well, when you're dead, you're dead. But there's a movement to basically replace parts. Now, we do replacements for, when you can get transplants. You get like a new liver, lungs, etc. And of course, you know, they're working on 3D printing, you know, replacement organs, replacement heart, replacement kidney, spleen, etc. And so you may be able to get a form of physical immortality by replacing the parts. Now, of course, where it becomes, you know, with the stuff like, you know, the heart and legs and stuff, that's all purely temporal. You know, if you get a new heart, you're still you. New leg, you're still you. Where it becomes kind of interesting, though, is the brain. If they replace the brain, is that still you? So suppose 1,000 years from now, there's something walking around which has memories taken from you today. And, you know, it comes back from, you know, Elvis Centurion lands, you know, in Tallahassee. Look at the old campus. Is that plastic, you know, is that machine standing there that is this memory from today, is that still you? Have you survived 1,000 years? Or is it just something that thinks it's you? And it makes a big difference, because if it's you, congratulations, you're 1,000 years old, you have survived. If it's not you, it's something walking around that thinks it's you. It's stolen your identity in a very literal sense. So interesting, this is one area where philosophy really has a very real impact, because if materialism is true, then this is probably it. And if the brain is just copied, it's just something that, it's a duplicate, it's an imitator, a doppelganger, something pretending to be you. Now with dualism, of course, if you've got a ghost and your body dies, what can happen? Yeah, your ghost could go on to someplace better, like Maine, or someplace awful, like New Jersey. Or it could be reincarnated. You can get a new body. Now, dualism doesn't guarantee survival, because maybe, you know, the soul just kind of like dissipates and falls apart too. I mean, it's possible. And as we'll see when we talk about these dead guys, they were concerned about that question. Now, back then, of course, it was total speculation, but today it's becoming kind of, you know, more of a real concern. We are replacing parts, and they are working on replacing the brain. So then in your lifetime, they'll probably be able to replace parts of your brain as you get older. And the good question will be, is that still going to be you? Okay, so next time we'll pick up with more stuff about the background, and then head on to more stuff.